these are the word work notebooks I've used with my class since about the beginning of January. I chose to get them coil bound 3 subject notebooks because I thought it would be easier for the kids to kind of use them and section things off and understand where things need to be going, and eventually find things that they have done previously to help them with future work when they're separated into those sections. So basically, to get started, I had my kids label each section of their notebooks, and we put little tabbies on them so they would be easy to find their sections afterwards. So the first section we labeled was learning about words. It's the front section of their notebook. The middle section of their notebook is playing with words. And the back section of their notebook is the word list section. And I'll talk a little bit more about what is in each of those sections as we continue on. So at the beginning of all this, I was a little bit daunted by getting the kids excited about using their notebooks and thinking about words in a different way, and even wrapping my own head around how exactly to use these notebooks in the most effective way so that the kids can benefit from it. So Michelle came to my class and we did a lesson together where she started out using a story from a book that we had looked at together that had a word for every letter of the alphabet and then a story to go with it. So we chose the word scintillate, and the story kind of has different clues and things like that that will give hints to the kids as to what the word might mean. So we gave them the word and we had them kind of try to think about what part of speech it was, a sentence that might go and use that word. And they had the story we were reading taped into the left side of their notebooks. And then on the right side of their notebook, we had them split it into 3 sections. They had 3 guesses to try and think about what the word might mean. So we had them guess at the beginning of the story what they thought scintillate might mean without really having any information on it. We read part of the story and had them take a second guess and think about some of the clues that the story had given that would tell them what it means. And then we had them guess again at the end of the story, using, again, the clues that they'd heard in the story. And we talked about it together as a class. So after the story activity, I created an anticipation guide that I had the kids write down in their notebooks. And it had a couple questions on there just for us to see how my class really felt about spelling and working with words and what their idea of what exactly it involved in class was. So these are examples of notebook pages that I would include in the front section of the notebooks with the kids in the learning about words section. So typically how I've structured it is on the left-hand side of the notebook is either an anchor chart, a short story, or some other piece of information the kids will need in order for me to facilitate the lesson. And then on the right-hand side, they will have some examples that we've created together and then some that they've done on their own of what we've just learned about. So in the first example up here, we've been talking about figurative language. So we had the poem Neil and Aliens Ate My Homework, talking about hyperboles. And then on the right-hand side of the page, we created a definition of what a hyperbole is, and they had to brainstorm the ideas first based on what they thought it could be after reading the poem. And then we created some examples right underneath there. In the bottom example, we created an anchor chart of idioms and what an idiom is and some different examples. And then on the right side of their notebooks, the kids had to create 2 pictures, one illustrating the idiom and the second illustrating what the actual meaning of the idiom is. And then they had to create a sentence using the idiom that they had chosen. So I really love having their anchor charts in their notebooks because it's been a really handy reference tool for the kids to go back and look at the different figurative language, or if we talk about a prefix or a suffix or root words, and while they're working with words, they can go back whether they're working on writing and want to include those figurative language pieces, or if we're doing word work and they are stuck on something about suffixes, they can go back and look at it, because I don't have as much space as I would like to include all those anchor charts on my walls. So it's nice that they have their own version they can go back and look at all the time. So the next section is the playing with words section. It's in the middle part of their notebooks. In here, this is where I've been working the most with them. this year, I have been giving them choice boards along with different word lists for them to complete activities on. And so students receive their choice board and then they do a couple word lists with the same choice board. Michelle and Dagan gave us an example of a choice board at one of our after school PD sessions. And so I used that one to start with, and I went through and I made all the kids do each activity one time. So I could teach them how to do the activity and then they would go and do it. And so I made sure that we all knew how to do every single activity. These are current examples of the word list that my students have. Last week we did a lesson on prefixes, so their word list this time is based on prefixes. A couple times I've used the word lists from the Words Their Way books. At the beginning of the year, I did the pre-test for Words Their Way to group my students, and we have used the word sorts from there as well, kind of based on what they needed from that pre-test. So I wanted to try something a little different with my current choice board because I found that even after doing pre-teaching for all of the choice board activities every day that we had word work, that some students just couldn't remember the criteria for each task. My kids are very visual and really like having lists in front of them and step-by-step instructions. So inspired by the responsive math stations, I created a board for my choice board activities. So each activity has its own folder and there's chalkboard tape on it so I can erase it and change it up once I have a new choice board to work with. But in each folder, I have a set of instructions written for how to do the activity, as well as an example of what it should look like when it's finished. Some of them I also have included different graphic organizers just because some of my kids need help. They can't really visualize how to lay things out inside their notebooks, so that they just grab the organizer, we can tape it inside their notebooks, and it makes it really easy. I've found having this board has been the biggest success lately for my class. It's super easy. The kids that are independent just can go and grab it and go and do their thing. They don't really need the lesson. They can figure it out, and they're awesome and independent, and they work really well. And then the kids that do need a mini lesson on how to complete an activity, or maybe need a mini lesson about the current word list, then I can pull those groups while the rest of them are working because they are so independent while working on their choice board. So once I had made up my mind to make up this board, I was a little bit worried it was going to take a whole bunch of time for me to do, but it actually wasn't as time consuming as I had thought it was going to be. I sat down and maybe took me 2 or 3 hours one night to get this choice board up and ready, and I brought it to school the next day and had the kids start trying it out. I have sent Michelle a copy of my latest choice board as well as all the activities that are on the board right now. So if you are interested in taking a look at them, they should be posted on the portal for you to access. So this top example up here is an example of the bubble letters activity. So students have to choose 5 words to draw in bubble or block letters, and then they have to create an illustration of some kind within those words to represent the meaning of the word. The bottom one down here is a work in progress example of the 5 clues, so where the kids choose some words from their word list and they have to create 5 different clues about them, and then they have a partner guess what their words are. For assessment of their books, all of the criteria are listed on their sheets in each activity folder. So it's super easy just to go through the criteria list and just check off what they have and haven't done. And then if they aren't complete the activity, I can hand it back to them and say, look, this is what you're missing and this is what you're missing. It's my hope that in the future or maybe next year, I can, as part of conferencing, sit down with kids and we can go through some of their word work activities and then talk about together what they feel like they did well and what they need to work on still. How I decide which students I want to pull for mini lessons, sometimes I just ask them to volunteer if students want to learn more about doing the picture dictionary. I'll pull a group of kids and show them a couple examples, work through them together of doing a picture dictionary. Other times if I look through their word work choice board activities, or I see in the front part of their notebooks that when they have done examples that they're not really understanding the concept, I'll pull those kids as well to do some small group work while the rest of the kids are working on their choice boards. For this choice board, it's been super handy for all the kids to have Google accounts now so that they can get access to these two apps on our iPads. I've been using Quizlet for the Study It choice on the choice boards. It's an online tool that lets kids create online flashcards, and then it's super easy for them to get on. They just have to log in with a Google account. And then I posted the link on our class website so the kids get access to our class page, and then they can see all of each other's flashcards once their deck is complete. They've also used Google Slides for Presentage, so they can create their presentation online and then share it with me when they're finished. The last part of their notebooks is the word list section. We haven't used this section too extensively yet this year, but these are a couple activities that I have done with them. For one of our math units, I created a list and had the kids go through, and if they had heard that word before, they put yes, and if they hadn't, they put no. And then as we moved through the unit, we created definitions for each of the words and came up with a picture or illustration to go with it so that they had a visual to help them understand as well. The top one is an activity we just started the other day in class. We're reading The Maze Runner together. So I chose words from the novel to include in their alpha boxes and had them go through and code each word. So a check mark means that they know the word and they know what it means. A little squiggle means that they know the word, but they're not quite sure what it means or have no idea what it means. And then a circle means that they have never seen or don't know that word and they have no idea what it means. The next step for us is going to be choosing a couple of words from this list that they don't know. And as a group in their pods, they're going to be predicting what they think that word means and explaining to me why they think that and what clues they've used from the word that might help them think that. They have their notebooks with them so they can go back and look at anchor charts. If the word has a prefix, they can use that to help them understand what the word means. And then we're going to go through and talk about what the word actually means and see how close their comparisons were. It's definitely a goal of mine to get better at using the back section of these notebooks for next year. I think that that's really valuable. It's a good place for them to include academic vocabulary and as well as word lists of their own. So if they're working on writing and they want a synonym for a certain word, or they're trying to think of a word but they can't quite think of the right word and they're asking for help to find one of those words, they can include those once they have them in their own little personal dictionaries at the back of the book.